Hello everyone, and welcome to the Deserts of Kharak Expedition Guide. So like in the previous Homeworld games 1 and 2, we have done the historical technical briefings slash, prelude to the end times, right? The big old document that basically tells you about the history of the world, the lore of Homeworld that is. And this is essentially really an updated version of that. This dives quite heavily into the culture and history of the planet of Kharak and its people. It will take some time to do, and I'll, get into that when we get into that. So yes, this is for, of course, Diamond Security Council eyes only. If we tell anyone, then we'll have to kill them. So we live in a time of great progress, yet our planet is dying. As you know, 4 years ago, we detected a massive anomaly deep in the uncharted desert. Its energy readings rivaling that of our planet's sun. We believed then, as we do now, that this object may hold the key to our survival on this planet. The genesis of Operation Stormbreaker was born out of that discovery. It proved a harsh lesson to us all, exposing our hubris and weaknesses. We will not make that same mistake again. Operation Kadim, its successor, has been 4 years in the making. It has one goal: to secure the primary anomaly for the North. We have researched and commissioned new deep desert carriers, assembled our best and brightest minds, and outfitted this expedition both scientifically and militarily to succeed. We will travel deeper into the Great Banded Desert than ever before. The dangers are many. Not all of us will return. Accepting defeat in the face of what others claim to be insurmountable odds is not an option. The Galaxian will view our actions as a violation of the will of Sejuk. They will not grant us free passage. War is inevitable. You and your crew hold the fate of our people in your hands. God help us if you fail. Dr. C. Nabal, Director, Northern Coalition Military Council. Okay, well, gee, thanks. Yeah, God help you if you fail. All right, well, we shall proceed. So there are several parts to this, as you can see here. This is going to take several videos. I anticipate at least 4, possibly more. So in this video, in part 1 here, we're going to go through this section by section, and as usual, I'm going to read everything. Yes, everything, okay? So if this bores the heck out of you, then you can skip right to the gameplay, all right? But like I said, I think that these types of documents, this documentation, is an excellent example of world building, particularly in the Homeworld universe, and especially on the part of the developers, because it fleshes out a lot of the universe that this game exists in. And in a way, I really do like the writing. The writing is very plausible. It seems, very sound in a way. And it's really good, I think, at helping the player become invested in the game world. For example, like if I may make a contrast, like I'm currently reading the Halo Encyclopedia, and while it is good, that big book is actually good at kind of fleshing out the overall story and mythos and world of the Halo universe. It's not quite as well written, I'll say. But anyway, that's really the only comparison I'll make here. So now, of course, being that this is a prequel game, it does flesh out quite a bit more of some of the people, and particularly the Kith, the clans on this world of Kharak. Anyway, this first video will focus on the first 3 sections: Kharak, Project Stormbreaker, and the Jaraci Object. I think the next video, number 2, will be solely devoted to Kharakid social systems, their Kithid histories, and societal roles, which is basically an expanded version of what we read in the original Homeworld 1 historical and technical briefing. It's the history of the clans, but it's been further expanded and modified slightly in some ways. Then probably video number 3, we're going to do number 5, Operation Stormbreaker, number 6, Operation Kadim, and 7, we're going to look at the vehicle manifest, which is just a breakdown of all the hardware we'll be using. Then probably in number 4, we'll be looking at number 8, the Kharak data presentation, number 9, timeline of notable dates, and 10, Rachel's personal journal. So that's my general plan. I think it's going to take about 4 videos to do. I'm not going to go into the making of content because it's purely, it's just making of content, which is really, really interesting. And you can kind of see, how Blackbird Interactive began as a studio, right? Their game design philosophy and ideas and stuff. So this game is quite a bit more cinematic in the way it tells the story. It focuses more on individual characters, whereas the original Homeworld and Homeworld 2, and I'm assuming Homeworld 3, focuses more on groups or organizations as the characters themselves. So you will note a number of differences between Deserts of Kharak and the original Homeworld games. In particular, I will say that the story of this game is very, very well fleshed out, and a lot of it really meshes well with what happens both in the game and within the universe. Anyway, that's what I'll say there. Let's get into it. So, Kharak, planetary analysis and astronomical data summary. Has a diameter of 7,000 kilometers, a circumference of 21,991 kilometers. Density is low. It is 6.7 billion years old approximately. 31% hydrographic, which I'm not sure what that, roughly a third of the planet is, I don't know, maybe covered in ice caps, or we don't see any oceans though, interestingly enough. So what this hydrographic data means, I don't know. And of course, a population of about 293,050,000 approximately. Kharak is a small and arid world in the inner edge of the habitability zone surrounding its star. This results in an equatorial temperature approaching the boiling point of water, with large, complex life only possible in the temperate polar regions. The planet's advanced age means that it is well past its era of geological upheaval. For the past 500 million years, the most powerful shaping force on its surface has been erosion. This has resulted in vast, shifting deserts that have buried most of Kharak's ancient temperate biomes, and swallowed what was once a complex chain of small seas that girdled the world until approximately 250 million years ago. So the ancient ecosystem diversity. Hundreds of thousands of species used to inhabit Kharak, but surface desertification ensured only extreme survival traits endured. The sands that cover these once fertile basins are particularly treacherous, and the surface can shift hundreds of meters in seconds under the right conditions. There are ancient stories of entire Kithid being wiped out while trying to migrate through this region, and even the desert-skilled Galcian and Manan give these regions the respect they are due, and travel only on vital business. Kharakid biology. Modern-day biologists divide life on Kharak into two broad categories, native and abnormality. Native life includes a variety of plants, animals, and biota. Larger life forms include insects, avians, and several marsupial species, the largest being the friendly, knee-high omnivorous hariri. As one passes from the sheltered polar areas into the open deserts, the vast majority of native life forms seek shelter under the sands, or ride the winds ahead of the massive sandstorms, filtering the dust for microbes whipped up from the surface. Desert hibernation. Desert-dwelling life has developed a method to deplete the cells of almost all water to prevent vaporization during summer hibernation. In the abnormality category, there are only 3 life forms: ourselves, a few bacterial strains, and the ubiquitous and annoying Reti. In all of Kharak, only ourselves and a small grain-eating pest share enough common DNA and skeletal traits to be considered kin. DNA comparisons. Testing is still ongoing. However, several base pairs exist in Kithid biology that do not appear in native Kharakid species. Thus the name of our biological category. We are clearly separate from the rest of the Kharakid biosphere, as we have not found a single ancestor species for ourselves or the Reti in the fossil records of the planet, while every other form of life on Kharak seems to be connected in a great chain of being. Kharakid environment. While our technology has grown in leaps and bounds over the past 100 years, the greatest hindrance to expanding our power and control over this world is its weather. Even on days considered nominal, the only truly clear communication takes place at the poles and at sea, where the air is relatively clear. Over the deserts, there is so much static generated by the sifting sand that radio reception is often marginal at best. So this does seem to imply that there is some sea or ocean somewhere on this planet. You just never really see it. And it has been mentioned before with the Magirian Sea, which is supposedly near the South Pole of the planet. Most large storms begin their cycle in the southern hemisphere. 1/4 of the surface area of our world is nothing more than a flat, reflective surface, with low-pressure, superheated air rising to the edge of the ionosphere sucks cooler, moist air in from the Magellanian Ocean. Again, there's a reference to an actual ocean somewhere on this planet. The resulting high-speed heat exchange generates large sandstorms on a nearly daily basis. Surface albedo. Kharak's dynamic reflectivity index averages 0.68 across the planet's entire surface for nearly an entire solar cycle. Yikes. For the past 50 years, the rate of superstorms has been increasing. Desert superstorms. The Chak Ma'at is a famous example. Circling the equator every 13 years, it drastically reshapes Kharak's surface in its wake. The largest yet recorded, and covered the entire hemisphere for 13 days and has been cited as a major contributor to the loss of the Ifrit Nabal on our expedition and survey mission in 1106. Addendum 12 MJ Environmental Projections. Attention Nabal Saw. As ordered, my immediate family and I were able to intercept and analyze the initial data returns from the Scylla's Eye generation of environmental monitoring satellites launched in 1068. Our data filter did not engage until late the following decade, but it should be sufficient to obscure the trends from which we have drawn our own conclusions. We have checked and rechecked the data for 5 years now, and there can be little doubt, my Saw, Kharak is dying. No one since the Age of Reason would argue that Kharak is a robust world. But even we were not prepared for the dark truth that was revealed once we were able to view this world from space. The sands are spreading globally, nearly 10 times faster than our surface observations had suggested. At this rate, the seas of the Three Sisters will be dry within 200 years. Soon after that, the desert will overwhelm the last of the polar mountains, and the last of our arable land will be dust. The natural aquifers our irrigation systems depend upon are also shrinking, over 6 times faster than initial predictions. So there's another reference to a possible sea or body of water, the Three Sisters. Even with the heaps and bounds in power and metallurgy that the orbital debris ring has brought us, our best case scenario is that in less than 350 years, Kharak will be unable to support our species. We will continue to monitor the decline and refine our models with the new line of ISATs. We bless your wisdom that you have continued to fund them, and we will defer to that same wisdom, Nabal Saw, as we continue to obscure and hide this data from the general public. We agree that to tell our struggling people that all this progress is moot would be a disaster at this moment. It might be enough to bring another age of heresy wars. We would not put it past the Mag Galcian to use this tragedy as some kind of proof our race has been judged and found wanting. That being said, no secret can stay buried forever. My family is loyal and will follow the will of our Saw. We have been true for centuries, since long before the day that our people emerged from Tyr under your ancestors' rule to set this world aright. But please be aware that the current rate of decline will become impossible to hide very soon. The truth will be known and irrefutable to all by the middle of the next century at the latest. We can only hope that by then your plan to save our people will be revealed as well. Kazel Nabal. So this is kind of interesting. They are actually hiding the ultimate fate of the planet. They are projecting that the planet will literally not be able to support life within several hundred years. So they're keeping that a secret from people. Perhaps wisely. Well, that is the planetary analysis. If we look here, the relatively close distance of Kharak's parent star has resulted in ongoing desertification over millennia. Northern Command's headquarters is located in Tyr, the capital city of Al-Kithid. So, Kharak is a dying world, and the desert is overtaking it. Let's take a look at Project Stormbreaker. Breakdown of Desert Fortifications Project, 1057 to present. The Northern Coalition and Project Stormbreaker. In the decades after the destruction of Sajuk Ka and Kith Galcian's retreat into the desert, there was a natural tendency for the remaining Kithid to pull together. First, they worked to channel and settle the survivors of Sajuk Ka, and later they joined in military cooperation against the Galcian raids for water and supplies. Over the next 350 years, as Galcian marauders became little more than a bedtime story to tell children who refused to obey their elders, the loose coalition of mutual dependencies faded into memory. but was never totally forgotten. What had once been a network of emergency cooperation became a system of trade and development links. While inter-Kith competition remained a factor in Kharak's society, a system of shifting alliances based on mutual benefit became an organic part of economic and political life in the North. This way of life made a new coalition possible when a new threat reared its head that was too big for any single Kith to handle. Originally where Kith and the Maul emerged to end the Heresy Wars, Tyr is now the capital city of the North. During the last triad of 1057, Kith Sajet called a meeting of the full Diamid of Tyr to discuss the results of their first analysis of the northern desert flow patterns and their devastating implications. The Diamid of Tyr, established by Kith and the Maul, the Diamid is where Kith had gathered to debate policy and settle disputes through rational discourse. Their investigation of sand flow and weather patterns revealed that the Great Barrier mountain range that protected the northern polar region, which had seemed insurmountable to storm and sand for centuries, would be overwhelmed within 100 years unless something changed. Great Barrier Mountain Range. Visible from orbit, this natural formation spans hundreds of kilometers across the surface of Kharak, acting as a natural sand baffle. The necessary change was brought about by the combined power of the Northern Kithid in the form of building a giant ridge of sand baffle walls, a full kilometer wide, girding the entire lower face of the Barrier Mountains. Project Stormbreaker was a wall thousands of kilometers long designed to save civilization in the north. Architectural planning and system design was provided by Kith Sajet, while Nabal returned to the forefront of Diamid politics to provide the engineering expertise for such a massive project. Pearl industrial know-how and construction equipment produced and placed the massive prefabricated sections. Kith Samta doubled their mining output for the entire duration of the project in order to keep the Hral factories supplied, and Sidim legionnaires provided security to the endless stream of convoys. Kharakian mineral deposits. Most ore on Kharak is typical for a silicate planet, however rare deposits of mineral with exotic properties have recently been extracted. Manan money and statesmanship kept the project moving forward despite the tensions between its member Kithid and all the things that could go wrong. The still image of real-time satellite telemetry downloaded from a recently deployed ISAT. Yes, you can see the desert there is very expensive. The Stormbreaker wall took nearly a decade to complete, and during that time Kith Galcian began to make itself known again after centuries of hiding in the equatorial wastes. Great Banded Desert. Temperatures in the equatorial band regularly reach the boiling point of water, comprised of desert, sand, and rock. Few species live here. At first, their return was marked only by communiques plastered all over construction sites and prayer speeches typecast from the waste into the polar comm relays. But no matter what the medium, the message was the same. Mortal Kithid had no right or mandate to oppose God's will. The Great Maker Sajuk, the deity that was said to have cast down the Kithid to Kharak, also known as He whose hand shapes what is. If the North continued on this path, then this wall would fall, just as the one around Sajuk Ka had once fallen. When words failed to inspire fear and obedience, the Galcian Kith Saw declared holy war against the North, a state of affairs which continues to this very day. Small raids began against construction sites. From a historical viewpoint, it is clear that the Galcian were perfecting their modern military tactics at the time. Learning how to inflict the maximum amount of damage against more numerous but scattered enemies was their goal. Strikes became more ambitious over time and caused more serious disruption to the construction schedule. Every triad, the sands flowed higher and faster. Project Stormbreaker setbacks. Gaussian pressure ultimately resulted in the use of weaker materials in certain sections of the wall to reach the targeted completion date. Kith Galcian has uniquely adapted to the harsh environment of the equatorial wastes. So presumably that's a Galcian soldier? Of course, the Galcian were not the only Kith learning and perfecting their warcraft. The wall builders had not forgotten the past. Stormbreaker was more than towering baffles and redirection nets. The fledgling Alliance military branches had insisted that the project defend against more than sandstorms, and the wall was fitted with a series of nested fire bases and fortified command structures. The early activation of these defensive structures shattered a dozen Gaussian raids and left hundreds of their infamous Fists of God warriors dead on the sand. For months after, there was peace, and the wall sped towards completion. But the Gaussians saw, at the time, could see that if the wall were completed, it would break any chance of threatening Tyr for decades. For this reason, he ordered a full commitment to Sifar Korshesh, the Knight of Fiery Daggers. So presumably what we have here is the Stormbreaker wall. On the first night of the year 1074, 10,000 Gaussian fists hit the twin gate wall forts guarding the main access valley to the interior, hoping to raise them and drive on into the rich lands beyond. The Guardian forts were still incomplete, but manned by 500 warriors and another 600 technicians and laborers. Guardian forts of the wall. Regularly spaced along the Stormbreaker wall, these forts house quarters, supplies, and amenities for extended personnel deployment. Withering crossfire took down the fanatics by the hundreds, but as the night passed, the northern defenders were slowly whittled away. By the first ripples of dawn, the fighting had entered the main gates. The last of the Sidim warriors fought and died side by side with Sejet technicians and Hral laborers who bravely sacrificed themselves to hold their position. When the last of the Gaussian reserves had been called into the breach, it was finally time for Nabal Saw to give the order to close the trap. The Gaussian Kith family insignia emblazoned on a flag. One signal echoed out from the calm towers of the gate. Bring the red. And with that, 2 full legions of Sobani mercenaries rose up from the desert floor and broke the Gaussian army against the stones of the gate. The Nabal had spent many lives to lure them in and make sure the Gaussian would be stripped of their army for a full generation, and it had worked. Stormbreaker held, and the Northern Coalition was anchored in stone. The world had changed yet again. Alright, so as you see here, and particularly, with previous histories, this is essentially a world beset by extreme tribal warfare, differences of religious interpretation, right? And again, as it wouldn't be a Homeworld game without some allusion or references to modern day or even historical or mythological events that occurred on Earth, right? Everything from the desert warfare to you can make comparisons to Islam, probably to the Crusades in terms of religious warfare. You can find other religious references, everything from Islam, Christianity, perhaps even Buddhism, and so on and so forth. So there is a heavy amount of religious conflict, tribal conflict, and you can find that in other cultures in the Middle East as well, within their ancient and in some ways modern history. Not to mention all the various mythological references as well. All right. So, number 3, the Jaraci Object. Brief on the discovery of the primary anomaly. And I believe, yes, the C is harsh, right? It's not the Jaraci Object, it's the Jaraci Object. Location, equatorial wastes. Analysis, metallurgy matches orbital debris. Age and origin unknown. The story of the Kharak space program is a tale of surprises and blind luck. Had our initial boosters been just a little more efficient, our first launches would have been high enough to be destroyed instantly by the debris belt, instead of safely discovering it. Had our first spacewalker not brought her Kith medallion with her, she would have been hopeless to do anything but stare at the piece of alien metal that had torn a hole in her capsule, instead of having the perfect sized piece of soft metal to seal the breach. Kith Family Medallion. Bearing the individual Kith family insignia, these medallions were originally a means of identification during the Heresy Wars. And without a glitch in a nav program, we would never have found a trace of the greatest secret of this world. After 80 years of spaceflight and retrievals, it was very clear that at least one, and perhaps several spaceships of non-Kharak origin had broken up in orbit. Our technology has grown by leaps and bounds due to back engineering of the small pieces of wreckage we have retrieved thus far, but still the sacred bounty we most desired eluded us. A functioning, intact vessel of any kind seemed an impossible dream. Decades passed with nothing larger than an office chair being spotted. As a result, in 1100, Kisajet instituted a new sensor system called Project Vin-Cal, after the ancient god of the hunters. So we know it is a polytheistic religion. Vin-Cal was a series of potent deep scan radar sats capable of sweeping the space around Kharak orbit for hundreds of millions of kilometers. While the program started with promise, returning a hit or two, which seemed to be larger objects in high orbit, these turned out to be malfunctions and strange, localized magnetic inversions upon investigation. Magnetic inversion, loosely defined stellar phenomenon that falsely registers as a synthetic power source. Further study is recommended in this area. By 1106, the project had been reduced significantly in terms of scale and staff. In progress launch of a new series of ISATs for orbital deployment. It was under these conditions that a young technician named Lekab Jaraci presided over a Vin-Cal sat with a malfunction in its maneuvering thrusters. Aware of how tight budgeting for his team had become, Lekab fought for the better part of an hour to bring the tumbling sat under control before he had to regretfully give the self-destruct command. It seemed at first to be another sad moment in a fading program, except that Lekab dutifully ran the last data tape before closing the file. Data storage. Though considered old by recent storage methods, data tapes are exceptionally reliable, making them the prime choice for cataloging. The recorded data had miraculously revealed a large metal object, but it was not in orbit. The sat's spinning path had caused it to repeatedly scan large swaths of Kharak's equatorial region. The power of the radar scan had penetrated to a distance of almost 100 meters through the shifting sands. And so, with shaking hands, Lekab sent his report on the anomaly that would bear his name through history. Something artificial was buried in the heart of the equatorial desert. Something huge, made of metal and surrounded by masses of stone built in regular geometric patterns. Since that day, other sats with improved ground-penetrating radar have been tasked to scan the Jaraci object, but due to storms, the shifting static-charged sands, and pure luck, no other scan has revealed as much information as the first fateful accident. In addition to the primary anomaly, many less intense returns have been observed and mapped. So that is what the satellite scanned, and they call it the primary anomaly in the middle of the Great Banded Desert. Alright, well, that was parts 1, 2, and 3 of the Expedition Guide. In the next one, we will examine Kharak's social systems, and then following that, we will do the 2 different operations and the vehicle manifest. So, take care.